यह ज्ञान की दुनिया, यहाँ दुनिया का ज्ञान, कृषि विज्ञान और अनुसंधान, नए क्षितिज अब छू रही शिक्षा, ऑनलाइन पढ़ाई संग लग रही कक्षा.
Good afternoon to all of you. Myself, Alka Arora from ICR-ISRI. I'm the convener of this session. So on behalf of the organizing committee, we welcome you to this panel discussion. This panel discussion is on, as we all know, that the human resource is the most important fuel to give the momentum to any development. Considering this into account, we are having the panel discussion on accelerating digital development through effective capacity building and change management. In this session, we are going to welcome our chairperson, the moderator, and the panelists. Please give them a big round of applause. This momentum should keep going because that will keep us awake after the lunch session. So we welcome our chairperson, Dr. V. Geeta Lakshmi. Madam, welcome you. Our moderator, Mr. Amit Vatsyayan, and our panelist for this session, Dr. Satyendra Singh Arya. Please come on the dais, please. Dr. Gopesh Tiwari, Dr. Douglas L. Stelle, Dr. Srinivasa Rao, Dr. Yanko Fernando Mishia, Dr. Sajid Parith, and Mr. Sudhir Agrawal. We welcome you all on the dais. As listed in the program, our earlier chairperson, Dr. A.K. Singh, could not join us because of his earlier commitment in some meeting, and Dr. N.S. Rathore could not join us because of he's not well. So with this, we introduce our chairperson of the session, Dr. Geeta Lakshmi ji. Dr. V. Geeta Lakshmi is the first woman vice chancellor of TNEU. Madam has got the specialization in acrometeorology. Madam has got the 33 years of experience in agricultural meteorology. Earlier to this, Madam has served into different positions, and she has served as a director crop management also. Madam has been graduated from the TNEU, and she's a very dynamic personality. After joining as a vice chancellor of the TNEU, Madam has done many reforms, especially for the fellowship for all the researchers. Along with that, she has the collaboration with many countries, for example, Norway, Japan, mainly in the area of climate resilient agriculture. We welcome you, Madam, on the dais and this session. And then our moderator for the session is Mr. Amit Vatsyayan. Mr. Amit Vatsyayan is the partner with Ernst & Young, E&Y, and he leads the rural development and livelihood discovery practice for E&Y. Mr. Amit brings in more than 17 years of experience. He has worked across 20 countries on different projects which include livelihood, gender, and economic empowerment, and has been involved in several policy making as well as practical implementation projects. We welcome you, sir. With this, in this panel discussion, we have got representation from 4 different countries. So let's welcome our panelists in this particular session. Now, with this, I hand over the session to Mr. Amit to take the deliberations forward. Thank you so much.
So I think today, in my view, we are going to be discussing one of the most important issue which we currently face in the blended learning ecosystem. I think a number of us realize that digital learning is increasingly becoming a way of life. I think COVID really provided that push across the globe. And as a result, we are seeing an explosion of approaches which brings in hybrid learning, learning management systems, also multi-mode learning. And I'm very happy to note that ICR also, under its initiative under NIHEP and now under RAES, is really thinking about how to take this ahead. But having said that, I think, this change is significant and transformational. And this, along with the background of the way blended learning is coming in. So earlier we used to have educational institutions which would provide degrees, and then we used to have vocational institutions. But at the same time now we are seeing, all of this world coming together. As far as India is concerned, under the national education policy, I think this has increasingly become a reality. So we also need to see that in that ecosystem, if blended learning, blended digital learning has to become the order of the day, what kind of capacity building approaches are needed? How do we really build capacity of the systems, the institutions, the people, and the stakeholders so that this becomes a journey which yields result and which also creates transformation at scale, which of course would impact India, but would also impact the world which we live in. So I think it's within this background that we are having a discussion. We are joined by, esteemed panelists. So as the convener already talked about, we have panelists ranging from the international institutions to panelists who are expert in the national space. And within this, at least our expectation is that through this conversation, we are able to pull out the gist of how do we look at capacity building for enabling, digital learning, and how do we look at core issues of scalability, sustainability, and viability as part of this work. So, with that, and of course, the panelists need no introduction, but I'm really grateful to have Dr. Gopesh Tiwari with us, who's the head of education for International Rice Research Institute. We have Dr. Douglas Steele, who's the vice president for Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resource Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, based out of US. We've got Dr. Sajid Parit, who is the senior lecturer at the Delft Institute for Water Education in Netherlands. Our own Dr. Srinivas Rao, the director for NAM. Dr. Sudhir Agarwal, director and faculty coming in from Wadhwani Foundation. Dr. Yanko Fernando Maikia, the director of Learning and Information Technology, College of Education, University of Washington. And Dr. Satyen Singh Arya, the CEO, Agriculture Skill Council of India. Under the able leadership of Madam Geeta Lakshmi, I do expect that our panelists would be contributing significantly with their insights. So without further ado, I would like to start off by posing a very interesting question to Dr. Maikia. So Dr. Maikia, what according to you are some of the most effective capacity building techniques for digital development, and how can they be tailored to different institutional contexts?
Well, hello, and thank you for the questions. Thank you to the panel. I'm really glad to be here, and I thank you all for attending and staying awake after our lunch. And so I will maybe challenge the question a little, and I will say, before we can decide what are the most effective capacity building strategies, we need to stop and think about what is our strategic plan for this development. We cannot think in building capacity without a clear path, a vision, and an overall strategy for the project. So once we, in my experience, if I can share with you what is usually what I do, is that I am the person, and I've been the person in multiple organizations where people with great ideas come to me because they have a new plan, or they saw this shiny object or this new technology and they want to deploy it at an organization. When people come and ask this kind of, they basically need funding or they need some support of that sort, we need to start thinking about what is it that we're going to be doing, what is the impact that this is going to have, where are we now, what is the vision where we want to be at the end of this project, and think how are we going to do this implementation, and how are we going to cover the gap. At some point, we're going to say, okay, what are the resources? How do we know that we are capable of pulling this off? And I think that there are things, and especially for these kind of projects, that first you think you need to do a diagnosis of what is the people that you work with, how prepared are they? So you need to know what is it that you want them to do, and that's why you need your strategic plan. You need to see if their capacity is there yet. Or if you really need to think in retraining and redevelopment, or do you need to get new skills and you need to start trying to get new professionals that are going to come to your institution. And you need to think if you have the capability of judging who is really an expert in this or not, because it is not easy to bring capacity. I currently work in Seattle, where you have Amazon, you have Google, you have we compete with many other IT enterprises for the same talent. And bringing talent is going to be a challenge. And we need to know what kind of talent do we need to hire. We need to know if we have a sustainable budget for that. So the other thing that you need to start, or that I usually consider, is about when you're building capacity within your organization, you're asking people who were doing a job and they were very good at the job that they were doing to do something different, or to expand what they're doing, or totally forget and build something and start a new career, really, under your leadership. So the question is, how am I incentivizing people to learn? How are we incentivizing a professor to learn these new technical skills, and why are they going to do it? Earlier today, we talked about the career path that you have within the institution, if this is something that goes for tenure or not. And I would say that's part of it, and I think that we need to start thinking about more out of the box what kind of incentives we're going to be building for the people participating in the process. I think that you can expect people to want to grow and learn professionally, but that's not a sustainable model. Once you need to provide, so you're going to start providing the training opportunities, and in these days, as we're talking about this online, this hybrid, this on-demand, and on-the-job training for the people that you need to improve or increase their capacities. We need to start thinking about how are you going to provide that, and that is going to be basically part of your test bed for your hybrid learning. If you can upscale the skills of your teamwork and of the new people that you're going to be bringing as you build capacity. And you need to have a sustainable model, because as you build the capacity of that people, at least in our market, people leave. It's kind of, you train them, and then you become an exporter of talent. But that's part of the business. That's part of how it works. So you have incentives, you need to have strategies to retain talent, and you need to keep offering good incentives and training opportunities for your team. There are some other things that go with your strategic planning that are associated with how do you bring leadership and executive support to your project, and how do you justify, or how do you gain support across time so you are going to be able to fund this as an ongoing process. Digital transformation is not a single event thing that you do, or implementation. It's not like you are building a building and you are done with it. Digital transformation is a cultural shift, and as a cultural shift, and it's an ongoing cultural shift. You start in one place, you're going to get to the point where you want it to go, and after that, you're going to keep building, because technology changes, skills change. So it's almost like a marriage. You really need to think long term, and yeah. And with that,
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Yanko. I think, the three things which really leap out for me is the question which you raised about alignment, that is, the alignment of the purpose, the alignment of objectives, and the alignment of the work which needs to go, incentives which you talked about, and of course, seeing it as a cultural continuity rather than a one-time work. I think looking at the other side of it, and maybe in a more sectoral context, I would also pose this question to Dr. Gopesh Tiwari, that from your perspective, what have you seen as being most effective capacity building techniques for digital development? And how have you seen that being tailored across different institutional contexts?
Okay. Thank you, Amit. Thank you so much, first of all. And good afternoon to everyone. Let me first give a brief introduction about the work that we do, and especially within the ERI education functions which we take care of. It is actually not hardcore education, but the type of education that we do, what are the research and innovations we do, how that can be taken forward to the partners, national partners across the world. So this is the type of work we do, and that obviously that requires a lot of capacity development approaches, techniques, education interventions, and so on and so forth. On the context of this question, which Amit has posed, I think different, one set of technology or one set of approach will not fit all of the requirement. Taking the lead from what Dr. Yanku said, I think initially we have to be identified and put our ground rule set, like why we are going to do these type of interventions. So probably we need to ask a couple of questions ourselves if you are going to set up a rule for blended learning for any of the institution, being as a research institution like us or maybe educational institution like any of the agriculture university. We have to first understand why this is required, how we are going to do, and what are the interventions in this one we are going to have. I think that three sets of rules, first of all, we need to understand and define within the system so that we can have the response of tests. And once that is there, then there is a couple of interventions comes into the picture. I think at the institutional level, systems level, and individual level, all the three level, we have to put up the capacity development plan so that we can implement this entire blended learning approach or digital transformation quite effectively. At the institutional level, if we talk about, and systems level, obviously it comes with the policy. It comes with hardcore infrastructure in the terms of hardware or software or maybe network connectivity and different type of interventions that we can think of. If we go at an individual level, then obviously at the scientist level or the teachers level, different type of readiness, how exactly that is there, I think we need to look at it. And we need to ensure that they should understand how this blended learning is going to flow. So we have to build their capacities, not the capacities in the terms of just on the technical side of it, but more on the education technology perspective side. They need to understand the education technology. They need to understand, instructional designing. They need to understand content curation. They need to understand different set of stuff so that it shouldn't be just like creating the videos and putting into the blended learning. That is not going to serve the purpose. I think that will fail the entire purpose then. Then apart from that one, different other tools and techniques that is there, either learning management system is there, or any of the video conferencing tools are there, or maybe any of the collaborative tools are there, like, there is a Google tools are available which can collaborate and all those stuff. I think that training on those type of aspects is also very, very crucial and requirement. And then curriculum alignment into the blended learning is again a very important component, because every subject, for example, if we do in IRI, I do personally some training programs around grain quality, nutrition, and all those stuff. I know that can be only done into the labs. So if I'm trying to put up that as an online program, it is going to fail. So we have to identify which type of program we have to design, what are the approaches we should keep so that it should be properly delivered into the blended learning approach and so on and so forth. So along with that one, assessment and all those stuff we have to keep into the kitty, and we have to also, second stuff, we have to get ready to the students. Our learner also, they should be knowing about the tools, technologies, collaboration methodologies, and all those aspects so that eventually they can deliver these programs very well. Change management is a very important component. I think briefly that has been touched upon. And until we are not, conveying the message properly, what is the mission, vision, and values are there, and they are not buying the concept of the blended learning. They'll be putting the question, and it will not be percolating down. So once I think these questions are solved very, very much, then I think each institution can devise the strategy based on the courses, which type of strategy they have to follow, how much of the face-to-face component, how much component of the online component they have to keep into a program, and then successful delivery so that they can ensure the expected learning outcome out of the program. So I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. I think a brilliant view on it. Many times what Dr. Yanko framed at a ecosystem level, I think you've really taken it to how part of it. And I think I would like to really highlight, I think, some of the issues which you have talked about. Quite often, and Dr. Yanko also talked about shiny new. Quite often the learning system which one is talking about, without really understanding on alignment of what will work, we are seeing loads of content being sent out.
Yeah.
But who's reading it? Is it really being useful? Is there a feedback loop? The other thing which you talked about, which really leapt out for me, is that is the vision, mission, and what we are trying to convey, are the stakeholders owning it? Are they part of it? And I think absolutely brilliant point. I think which brings us to a very relevant, and I think a question which is very relevant for us as well as for everyone in the audience, that how do we ensure that while I think what needs to be done is there, but how do we ensure that the institutions have the necessary infrastructure and technical expertise to implement these digital development initiatives? And for this, I'll turn to Dr. Steele for guidance. I think Dr. Steele already is involved with significant networks of institutions, and I'm sure he would have a global view of how some of these the infrastructure issue and technical expertise issues can be responded to in a cost-effective and sustainable manner. Dr. Steele.
Thank you for that question. First, I want to start by expressing my appreciation to the conference planners and the World Bank for the invitation to come join you. It's my first time in India. I have found it just to be wonderful people, an amazing culture, terrific food. The only downside I've experienced was the earthquake last night, but when I travel, my kids always say, "Come home with a memory, Dad," so I've got a memory to take home. On the 6th floor, I was looking out the window when the building started shaking, and I thought, is this an earthquake or is it spicy food? I didn't know for sure. Interesting topic that I was given to talk about this infrastructure culture. Back in the early 2000s, about 2005, a sociologist and futurist named Thomas Friedman wrote a book that was called The World is Flat. And in that book, what he was saying is because of advancements in technology and communication, we have a level playing field across the world today. And we have instantaneous communication with each other. We know what the world's events are all the way around the world. We have access 24/7. And I think when we moved into COVID-19, the pandemic, that probably even proved itself more true as our individual countries tried to struggle with how do we manage through the pandemic, how do we continue to keep our institutions open, how do we educate our students during a time of immense uncertainty. But it also provided a time for us to see where are the gaps that we need to fill. I would argue that many of the institutions in the United States were not ready for students to go remote at the speed and quickness that they did. And every American university handled it a little bit differently. Some of the states decided we're going to just take this little pause and get everybody back in the classroom, masks, social distancing, requiring vaccinations. We're all part of the standard operation. We had some universities say, come as you are. We don't think there's a science there to support what's happening with the pandemic. So we created this really interesting learning environment. But as we step back and start looking now, I think what we've done in the past 3 years, at least in the United States, was trying to struggle with what does it mean to have a hybrid ecosystem learning environment. What's it mean to either work totally remotely or remotely and in the classroom? What's the value of remote and the value of being in person in the classroom? And I think through that, we decided and learned very quickly we don't have the infrastructure we need to be successful. Most of our universities did not have really strong IT departments. We weren't working on developing web-based classes for students. We were working on keeping laptops for the faculty working. We weren't thinking about a blended environment where students come together online that may be reinforced. I love the concept of the flipped classroom. I think that is the way that many of us are starting looking at that now. What is that learning experience that you can have before you come to the classroom, and then what's it look like in the classroom? I think we found out a lot about inequities across our campuses and underserved student populations that did not have the technology or the platforms to participate effectively in online learning. We have a lot of rural areas across our country that had no access to high-speed internet, which is a great hindrance to a blended environment. And we looked at those of socioeconomic classes that could not afford the kind of technology, either computer or handheld devices or even a mobile phone, that could let them be part of what was becoming the emerging environment that we saw in the United States, and I think we're seeing it across the world. So what does that mean for us? It means that we have got to now step back and really reflect on what those infrastructure needs are. We spend a lot of money trying to get into the game immediately, and now it's time to step back and say, what do we need long-term to be successful? And I love the comment earlier about, a blended environment doesn't mean that learning is taking place. So the challenge we have is how do we still engage our students and have them participate in a learning experience that's going to create a lifelong learn from them. One thing I've learned about being here in this conference is the passion of the attendees and the Indian people of what the role is in higher education for agriculture, prepare our next generation workforce, prepare our students for the jobs that are out there. Some jobs we can't identify today, they're going to be out there. And what is the things that we can do through committing to an infrastructure and a platform that helps be successful. Now I'm going to close with just a small activity because we've all acknowledged it's been a long day already. We've come from lunch. I grew up in Texas, in the United States of America. I went to school at Texas A&M University. I know some of you have been to Texas A&M University. We do something different in Texas. We do a lot of things different in Texas, but one thing, we have a special greeting that we use in Texas. And that greeting is howdy. H-O-W-D-Y. And if you're on the campus of Texas A&M University, 55,000 students, we have a howdy walk. And if you walk across the sidewalk on that campus and somebody says howdy, you have to say howdy back. And so here's our time for group participation. I'm going to say howdy, and you get to say howdy back. Are we ready for this? Everybody's awake? Howdy. Okay, about half of you are now honorary Texans. The rest of you got to work harder on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Steele. I was really struck by the point where Dr. Steele made about how COVID, in a way, exposed the inequality we have in our systems, including in the infrastructure, in terms of who's getting access to it, who's participating really, and also the short-term versus long-term. That how do we look at infrastructure from the perspective of, immediate versus what is going to come in the long term. And I'm over and above, I'm taking this point while he made it about, I think, this event. But I think which is very important, that how do we lead change management when we don't really know what's the next technology going to be? So adaptive culture is absolutely critical to how we look at infrastructure. And, I'm not getting into procurement conversation, but a lot of the academic institutions I know of are thinking very strongly about how adaptive procurement approaches can be deployed. And how do you use design thinking principles when you're setting up digital enablement? So absolutely, fabulous to hear about this from you, Dr. Steele. I think I want to also take a view in terms of, from a national perspective, how are we looking at some of these issues around infrastructure and capability? And for that, I would request Dr. Srinivasa Rao to please share his view.
Thank you, Mr. Amit. It's a great pleasure to be here. During last approximately 50 years, NAM being a training institute of the entire ICR and National Agriculture Research System, it has molded itself in several aspects. For example, the current ecosystem is that not only production level and efficiency level, now we are talking about not only producers to consumers and markets, and also food to safe food, agri-exports, entrepreneurship development and startups. And agriculture, not only food security, nutrition, health, employment, environment, and single farmers to farmer producing a group activity. So it has, the philosophy has been changed in the NAM training ecosystem. And at the same time, digital development is essential for imparting quality education in the modern world. However, implementing digital solutions required effective capacity building and change management besides technology. For example, in case of NAM, during last 10 years, we have shifted most of our trainings into online trainings, and especially during COVID period, conventionally we organize around 100 trainings. Now during COVID period, we have reached out to many stakeholders through online systems. And during past 10 years, in fact, NAM is molded into strong MOOC culture, massive open online courses, and more than 12,000 stakeholders were reached through MOOC. And recently, we are reaching to South Asian, some of the countries which are registering. Everything is digital and registration to certification delivery. But at the same time, for this, capacity building involves development of skills, knowledge, and resources necessary to effectively utilize digital tools and solutions. And this includes training of knowledge and new technologies, creating digital strategies and plans, and investing in the necessary infrastructure and resources to support the digital initiative. For that, we also need that change management culture, and the whole thinking process has to change. When we are doing, we have a large ecosystem here. We have 113 ICR institutes here, and 74 state agriculture universities, 732 Krishi Vijnana Kendras, and many stakeholders which we are reaching, like Indian Forest Service offices from Indira Gandhi Forest Academy, Indian Council of Forest Research Education, all related stakeholders we are reaching. But when we want to see that the accelerated digital development through effective capacity building and change management, organizations, different organizations should follow these key steps. First step is need analysis. Second one is identify digital development goals and objectives. Third one is a SWOT analysis. Where are the strengths and opportunities in each ecosystem and state agriculture university and education system? Develop and strategize capacity building plan towards the digital. And another important is that develop a change management plan in the policy and leadership. Then strengthen the organization collaborations using hub and spokes model. Then implement and monitor these systems. What happened, that if we are going towards digital trainings, what happened, what are the impacts, and what are the feedbacks, how to strengthen, to revisit those trainings. By following these steps, organizations can accelerate digital development through effective capacity building and change management. I have 3 suggestions for taking consideration in terms of recommendations. Previous Vice Chancellor's conference, NAM has given presentation how to mainstream MOOC culture in the state agriculture universities. So when we are doing MOOC trainings, 1 month, 1.5 month training, typically our education system has a certain amount of training is required for their promotions. So often we are getting feedback that whether MOOC trainings are considered equally as a physical training or not, in giving the benefits and see the other benefits. If that is the taken, I think a lot of interest is generated among all the stakeholders, all the educationists, and many other people. Let us treat both MOOC trainings and in-person trainings there. Then, as per the new education policy, in fact, we can do in split. In fact, if instead of most of the agriculture universities, the deficiency of faculty is there. So instead of they come for 1 month training for MOOCs, of course, MOOCs is anytime learning. In fact, not traditionally during daytime. Anytime they can learn, they can write exam, everything online certification. But nevertheless, if 3 weeks, one month training is replaced with 4 or 5 short trainings. Can we account these equal to that duration? That would be really lot of digital trainings can be taken up. Then last point I would like to see in the previous session, Dr. Sudha Rao is put up. All training institutes, training, for example, NAM, it should be one step ahead because we need to have global perspectives. We should be one step ahead than people who are coming here. Whether our system is looking at NARM, whether these people should be better trained than the other stakeholders of these things. If that doesn't work, then perhaps colleagues will come and they mold themselves, then they take time, then they have to be evolving best trainers. So that is the system that we need to see that the training institute differently compared to any other research institute and academic institute or extension institute. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rao. I think a very good overview on the question which you're asking, and I think you've also raised a point which I'll be taking up at a later stage, which is about how do we give credit for blended learning? Where does that fit in? Whether we are approaching it from skilling or from an education perspective. One very significant question which comes out of this is that, if it is being said consistently that yes, this type of learning and change, capacity building is needed for this change to happen. What Dr. Steele and Dr. Rao has talked about in terms of, that there is a need for thinking at the highest level about this, but also back it up with the necessary infrastructure. How do we really look at, ensure a complete and successful implementation? And here, what I mean is, starting with an alignment of the goals and objective of what the institution is trying to achieve, being able to understand and size up the technical expertise and infrastructure which is needed, being able to implement that and being able to check how the feedback is coming and then improve the system. So for that, I would request, Dr. Sudhir Agarwal from Wadhwani Foundation to share his thought, what has been the best learning around this, given Wadhwani Foundation's history of successful experiences on digital transformation.
Thanks, Amit. It's an honor to be here. So, if we are talking of blended learning, at Wadhwani Foundation, I can share the capacity building and the training, skilling, reskilling of students to make them better employable. We use total digital platform. So that is the first thing. 2, we have a continuous engagement process with our participants. So it is not that something is done and then we move next. So there is a continuous monitoring and engagement process with the participants. 3rd, we are also building ecosystem. So we are not saying very clearly that we are here to do everything. We are very clearly saying it is the ecosystem that will work together to nurture, grow, and sustain. So very clearly, so these are, you can say, our mantras. Now, in addition to that, Amit, if you allow, I can just add 1 or 2 more points. One, see, if you are talking of blended learning, new learning, employable learning, I think new education policy is a great thing has happened in our times. So to me, I will put 2 perspectives to that. Or rather 3. 1, is it in the boardroom of every corporate today? We may like it or not. We may have some startup, some employer, the people who are employer generator, but majority of our outcome goes to the employment. So is new education policy is there in every boardroom? Because it is the boardroom that require people, and it is said that either people are unemployable or people take 6 months to 1 year to become employable. So is it? 2, it may be a strong view. This is more of my personal capacity I'm sharing. I think our existing education ecosystem has to let go a lot and let the new players come in. See, if you are talking of digital and blended learning, at least dozens of new players are there. Are we giving them space in our education system sufficiently? I may be unaware and I may have a lack of knowledge on that, but I believe, this is my personal belief, we have to create space. And we have to, let the new, like content creator, content designer, content delivery. I'm just talking of one aspect of it. It's everything different. And last point, my humble request is, I hope whatever COVID gave us, we have not accepted that as a norm. That was a fix. Whatever technologies we had, we just applied them, and I think we sustained and we survived. There's no debate and doubt about it. But is, as an ecosystem, whether the industry and the education system, have we started working on what are our, let me call it industry. If I call it this as an industry, what are our requirements of the demand side and supply side? Have we started working on, let's say, each of these platforms which we used during COVID as education version? Like, in ERP we said this is for aerospace, this is ERP for petroleum, oil. Are we saying collaboration tools? Let's use loosely these collaboration tools for education. Education has very different requirements, very different audience. And I can stop here, and this is my favorite, which I most times say, we have to learn from people like Paytm and Uber. No rocket science was applied, and Paytm, a rickshaw wala, sabji wala, pan wala, everybody accepts. So I think we have to create that pull factor in this blended learning concept so that there's a pull factor and then it grows. Thank you.
Dr. Agarwal, absolutely fabulous inputs, and can't agree with you more. And I think this is, for the dignitaries on the dais, as well as I think people in the audience. I think this issue of, if we have to achieve transformation and change management, we have to let go and also invite the new. And I think that's where the critical questions around change management comes in. And I think thank you so much for highlighting that particular issue. Along with that, the other point which Dr. Agarwal raised was about the diverse set of stakeholders. So yes, earlier we had the educational institutions and we had the students, but all of a sudden we've got now startups, we've got various set of the content creator, the content designer, and so on and so forth. And along with that, as I was saying, that in the backdrop of NEP, we also have different set of institutions who are making this journey from a vocational perspective into skilling as part of the NEP ecosystem. So the big question is that how can capacity building initiatives be designed and delivered to meet the diverse needs and preference of learners and the wide stakeholders in digital ecosystem? So for this, to start with, as I was talking about, we have to also see it from skill backwards into the educational institution. I would request Dr. Arya, the CEO of Agriculture Sector Skill Council, to share his insight on this issue.
Thanks, Amit. I think many speakers have already spoken about the importance of blended learning in the new education policy, which has already kicked in 2022, whereby a lot of emphasis is being placed on the vocational education. And second important part, which quite a number of speakers have missed out, is apprenticeship and internships. These are two elements which are going to be very important in the new education policy. When we talk about this blended learning, everything is fine. But somewhere we need to appreciate the fact that blended learning should not increase the gap between the reluctance, the general reluctance by Indian graduates. And don't take me amiss. Generally, they don't want to practice, and they're generally less skilled when it comes to practicing at the ground level or on the shop floor. If there is a blended learning, already, people are just confined to their rooms and they practice training. So somewhere there has to be fine balance between this blended learning and the skilling that they are going to hands-on training. And any kind of capacity building that you need to do has to be on learner-centric rather than trainer-centric, and it should have a outcome-based approach. Now also, you had just mentioned, and some of the speakers also highlighted the fact that when Mr. Rao talked about giving recognition, I think the time has come that we need to immediately take steps on this credit framework, because the government has already taken the wide stakeholder consultation, and the new credit framework policy has already been agreed upon by AICT, UGC, and NCET. So the ICR system cannot be remaining on the side, and I'm sure that talk must have happened how this credit framework is going to take place while you're talking about blended learning and online courses in agriculture. The one important element is when we're talking about new education policy, and some of the Honorable Vice Chancellors did speak about the necessity and their plans to take up diploma, advanced diploma, and Bachelor of Vocational programs with multiple exits. So every benefit actually percolates down. If you are doing certain activity on the blended learning for higher education, I think necessary steps should simultaneously be taken how we can make it available to those programs. Generally we perceive, they are not the higher learning institutions, or higher learning institutions are not focusing on that. But India needs a lot of para-professionals, and these para-professionals are going to come from this mid-segment. Diploma, advanced diploma. People need supervisory manpower. India has recently placed greenhouse managers in Italy, or poultry professionals in USA. And these countries who are less on manpower, they are looking at skilled manpower in agriculture at the practitioner or the supervisory level. And these, if you make them capable to this blended learning here, I think Indian diaspora gets a lot of job opportunities abroad. We also, have been taking, multiple stakeholders have been taking steps. And in Skill India, NSDC has made a e-skilling platform and a virtual skill hubs, where all, content has been put in e-video form. Of course, this blended learning is a one step ahead thing, but for skilling it was a big step, where the content was put up in video form, but with embedded links, and it provides opportunity for anybody who is accessing these PDFs to go to the right audio visual and in vernacular languages. Recently, in the recent budget, the Honorable Finance Minister, she also announced about formation of a unified Skill India digital platform, which is going to focus on formal skills as per the demands of the market, and providing access to entrepreneurial skills, and also linking these skilled people with employers in MSME sector. I think we should also think upon when a lot of good work has happened under this particular project on blended learning in higher education and agriculture. So you had a set of initiatives which have been taken under UGC, ICR, and now this unified Skill India digital platform coming in. How does these three platforms talk to each other? Because there are certain common themes. Agriculture universities have basic science colleges which offer biotechnology related courses, and maybe a botany student can always benefit with the courses going in an agriculture college, or a fishery college person can benefit with some courses going on the zoology side in UGC. So how do we make this interlinked, and whatever platform has to be there, it has to be glamorous and attractive to the youth, because even if you have got the best of the material and it doesn't enthuse and attract the students, then it's a failure. And quickly, some more point is, we should look at sharing of learning material across, the developmental outfits and the USC system. And yesterday, Dr. Paroda made a very interesting point. Whatever we are doing here, I think it has to link up with our extension activities. After all, agriculture is done by farmers, and somewhere our extension activities or extension department should get the benefit. Either it's a state government or it's a university extension department, immaterial. But are they going to get this benefit? Because most of them, and forget about them, even people within the agriculture system are not aware about what is the progress that we have made in the blended learning over here. The last few points is, startups are already playing a very great role, and every day, I see Times of India or Hindustan Times, some agriculture startups come. But are we taking enough steps for scaling the farmers in use of these particular apps? But one good point with this startups is they are already taking a step ahead for providing this blended learning to the farmer, because even if they are providing advisory or connect to the the markets, I think somewhere the farmer is learning. The last point is that whatever you are developing, the repository, how is it kept safe? We are, all things are in common domain, and we are, funded by the government. We have offered so many materials and common creatives. But it should not happen that today ICR system is making such good, material which is available in public domain, and tomorrow some commercial outfit actually, take the material away and start offering in the, commercial way. So there has to be proper, safeguarding of that. I think I will leave it at that and open to questions later.
Thank you, Dr. Arya. I think, again, a very comprehensive perspective, and I think the big takeaway is the need for the common credit framework, and I think that's definitely an important one. The other 2 points which you made, which are very critical, and I think the Honorable Prime Minister made a mention of that India is really looking at becoming the skill hub of the world. And that's education plus vocational capability. And, across multiple areas, there is going to be a need across an aging world. And India is seen as, a country which can provide skilled resources, and including in agriculture. And thank you for making a mention of that. The third very important point which you mentioned was about currently, we started off with a portal culture. Everybody was making portal. Then we went into an app culture. Everybody was making an app. Now, then we went into a platform culture. Everybody was making a platform. Over the last 15 years, I think that's the journey which we have been on. But the important thing is, and I think there are very good lessons learned from experiences such as UPI, where you don't have to build a platform. You enable a network where different platforms are able to collaborate with each other and are able to talk to each other to enable the agency of the learner. And I think that's what I'm taking away from the point which you made, Dr. Arya, about whether we have the Skill India Digital, or whether we have the Agri Stack, or whether we have the other things which are coming in. How do we really, make this connection? And the word of caution is also well noted, that while we are creating a lot of commons, but is that something which will also be used for profiteering without necessarily the due clearances? So, really good points. I would like to, locate this question in an international context as well, and I would request Dr. Parit to please share his point of view on this.
Thank you, Amit. First of all, a huge thank you to the organizers for giving me the podium to sit with the eminent specialists and share my views on this. Before I address the question, I would also like to say that I'm coming from IHE Delft Institute for Water Education, where the main mandate is training different stakeholders around the world, including India, where our target stakeholders are usually the ministries, the government officials, different agencies, where we address different topics related to water. And we talk about water, we cannot ignore agriculture, because it's a main consumer of the water. So we develop co-design trainings depending on the stakeholders' needs for different donors and ministries. So that's our mandate. Having said that, coming back to what we're discussing now and to Amit's question, I would like to say a few points, starting with the basic step which we need to do when we want to develop the capacity within the organization to adapt digital development, is that to have a very good training design, starting with the learning objectives. I can speak from our experience working with the different governments. As IHE, that what we usually do is to have a very elaborate need assessment workshops with the different stakeholders, where we leave the identification of stakeholders with the national experts or the national agency, where they come up with a list of stakeholders, and then we do a elaborative that need assessment. In recently it was also being done blended in a blended environment. And that is where we take it. We just need very simple few points. So we start with a very simple step to identify what are the learning objectives. And LO is very key to our training system, because we are also trained in how to adapt didactics, so how to bring this didactics into our teaching program. I already heard many experts talking about Bloom's taxonomy, active learning. I think that is the way to go, and that is also applicable in this scenario where we want to train organizations as well. It's not only applicable to the mainstream education where we talk about BScs or MScs, but it's also applicable in tailor-made trainings, and we strictly follow that. So the first step being identifying the learning objectives, then we talk about, okay, what are the topics we want to include in these learning objectives? Is it something which we can, do with the blended learning? Of course, we endorse blended learning, and then we talk about the assessments we want to conduct. If it is going to be a certified one, and one of the last, not the last, but one of the main part is how are we planning to sustain this capacity? If we as IHE, if there is a training of trainers to be planned, assuming that a TOT is being planned in India with some stakeholders, an external expert is coming in, he or she or the external experts can only handhold the agency to a certain period. How do we transition from that period to a self-sustained way? And that is one part which we really struggle. So we do training, we establish the blended learning environment, all the materials are available. Then how do we make sure that this is getting sustained? And that is the main challenge we usually face. So what we are now adapting is the strategy of long-term learning. So by long-term learning, we also mean that we work with the major academic organizations in that particular country, do the training for them, and then leave the mandate to them to do the trainings for the other stakeholders which are coming in. And it's successfully being implemented in countries like Kenya and Ethiopia. So those are a few points from my part. I think my previous speakers also talked about the farmers aspect, because one of the main aim for our activities is also about the adaptation of the digital technologies by the farmers, where we also introduce or implement field schools, for example, to teach them in a co-development way how to use these particular applications developed by startups or any other disruptive technology developers. So I think bringing in didactics is very important for the success of trainings within an organization as well. I think one of the major challenges, as I already mentioned, is to make sure how we sustain the capacity developed within the institute over the training period, how we make sure that it will keep on disseminating through other stakeholders as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Puneet. And linking this question though, so I think you talked about what works, but let's also talk about, I think, what could be the challenges or barriers, on effective capacity building and change management. So wearing the risk hat on, and on this, I would request Dr. Tiwari to give his thoughts. What are the key challenges? What really hinders it? What are the strategies to surmount?
Thank you. Thank you so much for, again, providing this opportunity. Let me put up into two contexts. One is the international context, like from ERI as a whole, what are the experience I have. And because I work with a lot with ICR and Agriculture University system also, so I'll be putting that effect into this thing. So as an international, as an international organizational perspective, if you ask me the challenges that I face into the blended learning, I think the most important challenge we face is the mindset and the capacity of, let me say, learners that is there who are going to use this particular blended learning of approach. Once we deliver any program, it is always into the international in nature. From the global south countries, Asia and Africa, both of the continents are involved, and we offer the programs to them. So once we offer them, first off is the lack of ability of these participants, either the researchers, extension officials, policymakers, to access these type of technology and interact with system for the learning. So that is one of the biggest challenge we have faced. We have tried to work out some mechanisms. We provide about 3 days, 4 days hands-on training. First of all, before we start a technical session on a particular technology, say bidding. We start first training them how to handle the digital, these technologies, learning management systems, interaction, how to mute yourself, otherwise a lot of voices come in and XYZ. If we are going synchronous and asynchronous based off learning, both of the aspects. So one of the challenges is this one. Second biggest challenge that we have faced, especially these type of interaction, is connectivity, especially in Africa. So a lot of challenges that we have faced, and if the content size is big, you are using a lot of multimedia into that one, and so on and so forth, for the proper learning design and conveying the message that you wanted to say as a research organization. Probably bandwidth is a big issue and they're not going to use it out. And if you are going to put that offline, then you are not going to get analytics at the back end. If they are learning properly, not learning properly, how much time they have given it the content, and so on and so forth. So obviously the tracking part of you for the completing the learning loop that you wanted to have, it will be hindered. So that's a problem in the sense of an international organization that we have seen, because once someone is nominated for training program in ERI, they are treated to be the best in lot. And they used to be nominated with the ERI for taking their training program and taking that learning for their respective NARES systems or the partnership systems and so on and so forth. That's one part of it from the ERI side of it. Once I go to the Indian agriculture system, I personally believe that again the human capacity and adaptability and buy-in of the entire concept of the blended learning is more important. Because people should understand why this is coming, how this is going to facilitate it out, how this is going to have the multiple effect and maybe reaching out to more and more number of people within the limited budget and having this capacity. But at the same time, we have to also look into this thing. Everything cannot be put into blended learning once we are speaking into agriculture. So we have to define that how much section based on a particular course or learning objective that Sajid talked about. Based on that, we have to define how much sections we have to go as an education point of view, knowledge delivery part of it, and how much is going to be more on hands-on working with the fields or laboratories and different other aspect of it. So I think, frankly, these are the major interventions. You can provide the infrastructure, you can build the platform, you can design the content, you can have the instructional designer, content designer, curators, graphic designer, and build a fantastic stuff. But if it is not going to be delivered properly and not able to achieve the learning outcome, I think we are failing in.
Dr. Arya, you also spoke about some of the challenges. Any additional comments over and above what you have said around what other challenges hinder this capacity building and change management issues?
I think the infrastructure, when you are trying to propagate, because all institutions are not built the same way in terms of infrastructure and whatever the hardware is needed. So that is one challenge. And second is, as my colleague pointed out, to keep the attention of the learner, because you are competing with social media. When it comes to a particular mobile or a computer, there are so many restrictions.
Thank you for that, Dr. Arya. I think one point which has been mentioned over here is about the learner journey and taking a feedback about what the learner is engaging in. I think that also takes us into a very interesting territory of the ethical dimension around consent, around what information is public, what information is personal, and to what extent, this line exists. So this is just one, but there are also other ethical considerations that organizations have to take when they are looking at capacity building and change management. So Dr. Agarwal, I wanted to get your thought, and then after that, Dr. Maikia.
Thanks, sir. See, ethical, I think, ever in the good old days, the trust was between the people. Now, as we have gone digital, the trust has shifted from people to the technology. And that has posed multifold challenges. So one is the government, who can make policies, regulations, implementation, judiciary to resolve the issue, blah, blah, blah. But to me, I think we should keep government role minimal, because we have seen anything where government has exited, those sectors have flourished and things have worked. It is not that government can't do that, but it's not that doing. Second is about awareness among people. Because today all of us, and this is my favorite again, when I need a Gmail account free or Facebook account free, I give all my consents, I post my photographs, family photographs, travel, I put my credit card details, everything I put, because it is coming to me free. But when it comes to something in the formal domain, then I think there are noises and voices, and also people are, feared about this. So the answer lies in capacity building. We have to make people aware by saying, these are the 2 or 3 levels. And today it happens. What has happened, all the companies have started doing private, consent. So they ask you and they give that instantly. So I think there is a lot of capacity building has to happen if you really want to address this part. And third to me, I'm often beaten by my industry friends when I say industry has to grow beyond its greed. Now, I'm absolutely clear on this. And recently we have heard about the pharma apps. The government is taking a view on that, because while they are giving 25% plus 15% some discount, the data is being sold. And the same citizens, because I get 25% discount, I blindly say yes to everything. But now government, so that is the role of government. But I think beyond anybody, if industry becomes a little more responsible, because we are living in a data economy. Data is money, data is, how many people there was an app just now, a phone, you call wrong back, 2 times, they will tell you. Today what happened, you call 2, by the time you close the call, you get 10 calls. Because immediately your data is circulated among the people around you. So I think one is awareness, it will take a longer time. 2, government regulations, I think we have to be not harsh with the government, and we have to be nice to the government and let them do their bit. But more than that, I think it is the industry in a data economy. Industry has to become more responsible. And best is self-compliance, self-regulatory, and the competition among industry players should bring this higher level of privacy concerns and resolutions.
Dr. Maikia.
Great. Let me try to extend a little more about the issue of information literacy, or what I see as information literacy. Like one of the things that we need to start thinking about is that students and all of us really accept these free products, and then they're really free because they're monetizing our information. And the assumption that information and data privacy are now an aspiration that is not something that we can attain. So I think that in this era of concern about privacy and security of information, we need to be I think that we need to add that to the things that we need to prepare, or the capacity that we need to build in everybody is information literacy and digital citizenship, so people understand that the new environments that we are pushing for have new demands. We are talking, and we have heard many people about talking about ChatGPT, for instance, these days. And that the truth of the matter is that we are not going to be able to deter students from cheating. That we are in the first iterations of this technology, and in my mind, this is like now we are at the stage when calculators were released. And we think, are these going to be detrimental for how we learn mathematics? Not really, but then we have computers that have 1,000 times or millions of times more capacity. So all that, not for us to be afraid of, is just to start thinking about all the changes that are coming. The future is promising, but it is going to be very different. We are going to need to think of different skill sets that we're going to be needing. But that was just thinking about the conundrum of information literacy versus privacy and security of information. And I think that education is very important in that. One thing that is super important for me these days is accessibility and equity. So the reflection is, who are we building this for? And we, as my university, the University of Washington, is committed that we're building education for everybody. So that means that we are talking about people who may have disabilities, who may have sensory, like visual or hearing impairments, or they have physical and they cannot use a mouse, they cannot use a regular interface, or they have psychological, mental disabilities that need to be addressed by how many stimulus they receive during their education. But accessibility is not only that. You can think about accessibility as a framework where you're talking that, okay, there are social disabilities, if you want. There are social limitants, and there is going to be language, there is going to be race, there is going to be gender, there is going to be so many things that made us a person that we need to consider when we are designing online education. Because if we don't think in those, it's really easy that we start taking people out of their training, that they're not going to be equally capable of accessing all these content. So I think accessibility, equity, data privacy and security, as we talked, and also data privacy and security in the context of predictive AI. So you're going to be collecting information about millions of students. You're going to be able to build models of people who are learning and people who are struggling. And you're going to be able to discriminate that people. What you do with that information becomes critical. We need to be conscious that models are biased and that we need to be prepared to be good regarding how do we take that data in the world of predictive AI and that kind of stuff. Intellectual property and job security. So in the analog world, you were a teacher, you taught something, you leave that position, that thing's not going to be taught anymore. Well, now that is not true. Now you can teach something and then you leave, and the university or institution can keep monetizing on what you did. And this is a matter of, we need to reach agreement. What things are mine, what things are yours, what is my contract with the institution, what does it mean? So that is something, that is a topic that we have faced when we start using a bigger scale online education, because it is a real concern. When you're separated the things that you teach are separating from your persona, then what happens? What are the strategic decisions? And finally, a note about employability. So we create new careers, we create new programs, we can scale them up, and we can train millions of people. Super. Do we have a market to take those persons? So I think that thinking about our duty as developers of education to guarantee some level of employment to the people that we are training is also like a moral predicament.
Thank you so much. I think, we have been covering an interesting journey, starting off from what kind of ecosystem we are talking about to, I think, the very, very important considerations around ethics. Looking at this from an overarching view, and I would like to pose this question to both Dr. Steele as well as to Dr. Rao, that how do we look at success and how do we evaluate that success? How can an institution say that they have been able to be successful in capacity building and change management around blended learning and digital enablement, and what metrics should be used? Dr. Steele first.
I want to first say thank you to the panelists who mentioned one of our end user stakeholder groups is the farmer producer. It's easy to forget about them. The average age of a farmer in the United States is approaching 6 to 7 years old. They're probably not concerned a whole lot about a hybrid, what they can do today with their hands and see with their eyes is going to make a difference for their production practices. And I think it's a balance we need to be sure we're well moving forward. And so the first thing we have to do is find out what are those measurements that we really want to evaluate. Is it student success? Is it the student learning experience? Is it increased enrollment? Is it more engagement of students? Is it faculty participating more in professional development? Is it affordability? Is this a model that can make a degree more affordable? I think those are the things we have to put together to implement a strategic plan that we can then measure against. And many times we want to measure against everything, and I've heard more than one time that the enemy of good is perfect. We won't get this perfect to start with, but we can get it good. And so let's get it good and then build on that moving forward. I think a couple things came to mind. A speaker yesterday talked about the only constant is change, and that's right. It's going to be a changing environment. It's going to be a fluid environment. It's going to be an environment that we have to be aware of what's happening and what direction technology and our students are going to take us. But I think about being uncomfortable in this process and the uncertainty of this process. But I know if anyone can resolve these issues and tackle these problems, that's what we do in higher education and agriculture. I think for much of our history, we've been on the cutting edge. And so I would just challenge you that if there was an easy answer already out there, it would already be published and for sale on Amazon. It's not there right now. And so the best you can do is go individualize a plan for your institution, be able to measure that plan to make sure you move in the right direction, and most importantly, where we all fail, commit the resources needed to be successful.
Dr. Rao.
Yeah. After COVID, we have taken one study that how the online trainings and digital trainings have been impacted. And we have taken large number of teachers as well as many hundreds of students. What are the important messages have come from the student perception that we are totally missing social learning, we are losing cross learning, and group learning is lost. And we have been, in fact, during that period, it is the best system which is available for learning, but retention is relatively low, and exposure to the stakeholders is very less, and job creation is comparatively less. More or less similar feelings were expressed by the teachers that at least as per that, based on that study, what we feel is that especially in applied science like agriculture, some part of experiential training is essential along with blended learning. At the same time, a practical, Mr. Amit, a practical difficulty, Narum every day is online trainings we see. Many times we do teachers, young faculty, many students in agribusiness management. In fact, we need to build the culture of our students and the young faculty to the online systems. When we are taking one hour class, 45 minutes class, despite so much interactive the class, asking the questions, first 5 minutes all videos are on, and most of the time we will be speaking to the empty screen. Despite for the group photograph, at least we request them, please come on to the videos. Again, they come quickly off. So perhaps the culture has to be built that it is equally important, and almost if not 100%, 90%, 85% is learning is happening. We need to value it, and we need to see that the psychology change in that. And otherwise, any teacher interest is that empty screen speaking is certainly, however, best teacher. However, is a motivating, impactful teacher is there. So that is another issue. These are the two studies which we have taken based on more than 150 trainings, especially during COVID period. Even now also we continue. But at the same time, Mr. Amit, we have a dual purpose of trainings. NAM train more than 150 startups. They are sitting across India in different states. A basic training is given at the NAM, but remaining mentoring, other things completely we take the advantage of online mentoring. Technology, these things. So certainly a dual type of things is very, very important, and based on my observation is that some part of practical and experiential training need to be added. And the same thing, our Tiwari ji also said that what to be completely and what not to be, and a hybrid mode is that is the message I would like to give.
Thank you, Dr. Rao. I think a number of us would relate to the question of screens going blank while you are doing a class. So, thank you for bringing that to life. I think, one thing Dr. Steele talked about, let good not be the enemy of great. And I think that is my question, to Dr. Parith and Dr. Arya, and it could be a short answer, but really would like to understand that how do we look at managing the need for speed in digital, capacity building versus the need for thorough capacity building action which needs to happen. So the balancing of the digital development which is happening and the speed at which is happening versus that we would like everybody to know everything on the, build the capacity before we kind of hand over. So how do we strike that balance? And how can, to quote Dr. Steele, how can good not be the enemy of great?
Yeah, thank you, Amit. That's a very interesting point. All I can say is that there is no shortcut. It's adapting digital technologies, especially with the wide range of stakeholders we have, is a long process. I will also touch upon what Rao sir has mentioned about these surveys or the evaluation. That is very well came out with the evaluations which we have. The results of the evaluations really depends on the capacity and the adaptability of the participants. So it is really difficult to make a generic conclusions based on evaluations and surveys. It goes with the speed of adaptation we can expect. So I don't have a clear answer to that point, but what we experience is that from a donor, if it's a donor-driven program, what we need is a long-term support. Okay, maybe the major chunk of the support can be for the initial years where we establish our base trainings, the base learning objectives, everything. But it has to be followed by a follow-up phases, phase 1 and phase 2, where we backstop with the technical backstop with the stakeholders to see where they are on the adaptation. So that long-term support is very important from a donor's perspective. Otherwise, it will be again, 2 years, 3 years training, and it stops there.
Amit, seemingly innocuous question, but a difficult one. Speed versus thoroughness. I think India has been a country of jugaad, and we do it really well. And I think it will be, as we move forward, we are going to learn, but jugaad is something which we are going to adapt, because every institution is not of the same financial bandwidth, and we need to, sometime, I don't know what's the right cost I have to spend also, neither I have the bandwidth. And somebody quotes for his 18-hour material something around 12 lakh rupees, and somebody quotes 30 lakh. I think one of the solution here, when I'm sitting in this conference and many vice chancellors are there, one thing is something which has commonly been generated under this project on blended learning, and which might be getting available to all the universities. But somewhere, the universities which have come from a same genetic pool, or same regional things, say for example Haryana, Punjab, or say Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, or say Karnataka and Kerala, this kind of cooperation should start at those levels also, within the small groupings of universities. Once they start sharing, then only you can actually tap into bigger things of tapping into whatever has happened here. Otherwise, it will remain an insulated effort at the national level and not at the regional level.
Thank you, which in a way brings me to the last question which I want to pose. And here I would actually request all the panelists to weigh in with the thoughts, very briefly. The question which is that, we are seeing two sets of issues. One is that institutions must collaborate, and, and increasingly digital is almost forcing that requirement. And at the same time, there is also the question of long-term sustainability and scalability. So in the background of blended learning and the need for capacity building and change management, what do you see the institution must do to facilitate collaboration, openness, as well as reach sustainability and scalability? So we can go this way, Dr. Steele. So everybody, I would request all the panelists to give your views, please.
There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think this is a great example where we have to collaborate. We have to go together. We have to share best learning practices. We have to share what doesn't work. We need to share faculty ideas. We need to share the student experiences. We need to share how ag producers are adopting new practices and technology because of extension work. We live in a world now we can't go alone, and so it will be about collaborations and partnerships.
Dr. Arya.
I think if you really want to make it scalable, somewhere the trainer interest has to be made. I think the capacity building at the trainer level, that is one thing I think the reluctance of the trainer might be a big stop.
We see that a lot of value in the collaboration and external faculty. In majority of the training system, ecosystem, we bring at least 20 to 30% from industry and startups, and also civil servants, policy makers in most of the ICR system, particularly in NARM. So whenever we bring a lot of diversity in the resource persons and with several backgrounds, that is well taken, and really the outputs and outcomes are better.
Okay, thank you, Amit. Thank you so much. For me, I think the key word will be sustainability, because that's a very, very important word if we are going to take this forward. Sustainability of the system, sustainability of blended education as a whole will compensate everything, starting with putting the basics right, why we wanted to do this thing and so on and so forth, putting the collaboration and partnership into the kitty, bringing the technologies and, bringing the capacities, continuous capacity of the stakeholders, either it's teachers or coming on the new technologies to the students and different other stakeholders. We have to continuously build the capacities of those guys so that they can adopt, they can sustain these technologies. And moreover, I think a component of innovation has to come, because we are sitting into the technology domain where the technology is changing very, very quickly. Yesterday on the learning management system, something was there, say SCORM compatible content was there. Now today, if you are talking about, Tin Can has come up. So Tin Can is taking care of and it's supporting the interoperability between the different content platforms. Now, with this type of stuff, I think innovations has also to come up with the university system and institutional system, so that we can ensure that the entire system that they are developing is not for a couple of years, but it is going to be sustained for the long time, building on all these steps that we talked about.
Thank you.
So yeah, I agree with everything that they say. And also, I think that alignment is critical. So you need to be aligned with your partners, you need to be aligned with the market, you need to be aligned with their mission and vision, and you need to have a mission and vision. You need to develop systems that shift the conversation from the technology itself into what is the education and how this education is supporting the mission and vision, and have clear executive sponsorship and app management in terms of communication with the powers to be, and try to work in funding and long-term funding of the initiatives.
Yeah, I think I will reiterate what I said before, that the stakeholder participation and collaboration is very important. As I said, we should start from there, bringing them together, discussing what are their needs. I think that itself will initiate some kind of collaborations between them. But I will stop with saying one challenge when we deal with the government stakeholders is that to keep the same participants throughout the trainings. So if you have come up with a training, a series of training, 3 trainings, it's very difficult to have the same participants from the different government entities all over India, for example, because of several bureaucratic deputational mandates which they have. So that is one challenge, one practical challenge we usually face, and I think those factors should be also considered while to make sure that it is sustained.
So Amit, from scalability and sustainability perspective, I will rebuild on my ecosystem. Let us first publish. Let every possible stakeholder know I am a stakeholder in education system, including parents. Today, I think none of us have touched parents when it comes to education from home, remote classes and all that. I think the weakest link could be the parents. Second, I think India is a model where assisted model works. So can we make our people who are undergoing education today, can we start making them champion? Like if today rural people have been able to get government services, CSC is the answer. And we should not say, "Arey CSC hai, education hai, hum alag hai." I'm sorry. We shouldn't say education is different. We have to learn that today a villager is able to connect with the central government for services through assisted model. So we should not believe that education is different like Maggie sauce, so it can't be done otherwise. So I think we should assisted model and make our existing force, because that will give us the scale. Thank you.
So back to our convener.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, my big thanks to DDG Education Agarwal sir for providing me this opportunity to share the session. And my big congratulations to Amit, who has worked so hard to design so many nice questions and keeping the panelists so engaged for the thinking process and coming out with so many points. It's really wonderful job you have done it. So to me, the transformation in agriculture sector, it is actually getting too much transformation is getting. And like the NORM director said, we went from farm to collective farming. Now, like in Japan kibbutz system, the farms are getting collected and then, the ownership lies with the farmers, but at the same same time the cultivation happens in a common way, profit sharing is happening in a common way. So that kind of transformation is happening. And also like individual farmer to farm producer organization, that's a great thing that is happening all over the country. So this kind of transformation is happening. Not only there, like we had structural kind of education, classroom education and structural kind of education. Now we are moving on to ODL, open and distance learning kind of education. And COVID has opened up so much of opportunities, though it has given so much of distress, but it also has opened up a lot of opportunities. Everything was stuck, but not the education, including agriculture education. We moved forward so well during even the COVID time. And then the biggest challenges are there, the e-resources and learning materials, finding it where it is happening. Those things are really, it's becoming critical. And similar to that, the technological advancements are also happening. For example, now the buzzword is artificial intelligence. Everywhere this is happening, and wherever we go, automation is happening. Those kind of things are happening. And then the space technology is being used on a much higher way. Beyond our imagination, we are using space technology for application in agriculture sector. And the simulation modeling, that is also becoming one of the important area where we could simulate anything and everything, and we can just foresee or project things. So that is what is happening. And digital farm resources. Digitization of farm resources is one thing, which is again the technological innovation, where not only the farm resources, the natural resources, the soil, everything, we keep a layer and we are able to decide so many things on that way. And nanotechnology, agro-advisory services. Previously, we used to give like a kind of for a space-based agro-advisory services. Now we are going with individual farm-based agro-advisory services. To that level, we have just gone in depth. Blockchain technology is another area where there are lots and lots of innovations are happening in agriculture. So not only in this side, but there are also mental changes are also happening. Previously, after the agriculture education, now the demand for agriculture education is also too huge. For example, in Tamil Nadu Agricultural University, this time we received more than 42,000 applications. You can imagine, for the provided seat of something close to 5,000 seats, we had 42,000 applications. So that is the way the demand for agriculture education is also increasing. But the people coming out of as graduates, previously we used to look for jobs. Once you do with a UG degree, you used to think about the government job like agriculture officer. Now gone are those days. People wanted to take their own startups and they want to become big entrepreneurs. Lots and lots of entrepreneurship is coming out. So what type of education we have to give? So that is again, there are lots of challenges people were talking about it. The panelists were giving so many ideas about the challenges. So, but the biggest challenge to me, like whatever the education that we give, the people should get, or they should develop the capacity to serve for the small and marginal farmers. They are the 80 to 85% of the farmers are small and marginal. So they need to just inculcate something to serve for that community. So the mindset, openness of the mindset should be the biggest thing which we need to think of. Coming to the digital agriculture, it is not new to us. It is as old as the computers got introduced into our Indian system. In abroad and all, it got introduced much earlier than when we were using it. In 1990s, we started using the computers in a larger way. In that time itself, the digital agriculture came. Now, on those days, computers used to be the biggest kind of a treasure. Even I remember one of my professors, he won't allow me to sit continuously in the computer. He used to say that, like, don't sit in front of the computer all the time. Just put the time when you are switching it on and off time and like that and all that goes. Now, with just a digital VOS, you can have entire resources inside the digital VOS. That is the kind of development that has happened. So the linkage with the industry is also becoming in a bigger and bigger way. Now, coming to the blended learning system, this becomes the order of the day. We cannot escape from the blended learning system. We have started, whether we are naming it as a blended learning system or that, but we have started using it. We have got adjunct faculties. We have accepted adjunct faculties, those who are sitting across the globe, but they are teaching to our students. 3 lectures, 4 lectures, they are teaching our students. So there comes the blended learning system. So we are doing it already, but we have to just formalize it. Like our panel member said, we have to strategically plan for a huge huge cultural shift. Like people are used for the face-to-face reading. But one thing is we have to definitely design curriculum, which one to go for blended learning. For example, some crop production courses, you can never think of it because this has to be practically, like we have to do it and learn it. The students have to learn it and do it and learn it. So you have to decide, these are all the courses which has lots and lots of basic things that can go on the blended learning system. So those kind of brainstorming has to happen in the agriculture education system. These are all the things that can go on offline, and these are the things that can be online. So this kind of clear strategic planning, if you do it, that will really give a kind of a base assessment can be given. So again, in the capacity building, first thing we have to build the capacity of the institutions. One thing is the institution, they have to have openness, like if suppose some resources are there, some data is there, we have to have some openness to share the resources and data. Once you are keeping it in shelves, that is all. Publish or perish, that kind of things will happen. So we have to have openness in sharing our resources. So once the resources are done, the collaboration is again very, very important. That was really taken up by all the panel members. Collaboration is one thing which is really important. That will avoid duplication of work. So one particular thing is done in one institution that need not be repeated in all the other institutions. So this kind of collaborative kind of a thing will definitely take our education system into next level. So this is one thing. The infrastructure development, government has to play a major role in the infrastructure development, mainly in cloud space. Most of the institutions may not have that much resources to spend on buying the cloud space. So the governments can buy cloud space and allocate the cloud space, and they have to give permission for using the resources, so that this will actually take most of the people to enter into this kind of a virtual as well as online learning platforms will be there. And tools, this is very, very important. What type of tools and what type of technological advancements are happening? So one thing, through IDP program, we have been very fortunate to have so many tools given to us, including HoloSuite. Like the advanced technologies that are coming, people have started thinking over it and accepting it. So those kind of things are also important. And implementation, again, we have to have a clear plan. Institutions should come forward, and there should be a clear guidelines, and it has to be accepted by everyone. Change is the only thing which cannot be changed. So we have to get ready for the changes, especially for the goodness of the students as well as for the staff and also for the society. So with these few words, thank you so much for the opportunity given. Wonderful panelists, and it is really great to sit and listen to each and every one of you. Thank you so much. If there are any pressing questions, you are most welcome to ask.
Thank you so much, Madam. So this brings us to the end of a very interesting session. So now it's time to pay our humble gratitude to all the dignitaries on the dais, and those who have joined us online. So now, because we have a limited time, so I request our chairperson, Madam Geeta Lakshmi ji, to please come in front and do the honor to present the mementos as our token of love and gratitude to our esteemed panelists. Madam, please. So I'll be inviting the names one by one. Mr. Sudhir Agrawal. Dr. Satendra Singh Arya. Dr. Satendra Singh Arya. Dr. Gopesh Tiwari. Dr. Gopesh, please. Dr. Douglas. Dr. Srinivasa Rao. Dr. Yanko Fernando Mishia, and Dr. Sajid Parith. It's time to honor and acknowledge the efforts put in by our moderator, Mr. Amit. All of you will agree with me that Dr. Amit has managed the session very meticulously. I request Dr. R.C. Agrawal, Chairman Organizing Committee, and Dr. Rajendra Prasad, Co-Chair Organizing Committee, to please come on the dais. And at the same time, I request my rapporteurs, Dr. Chandan Kumar Dev and Dr. Samarth Godara, to please come on the dais for a group photograph. I request our chair and the co-chair to honor our chairperson of the session. I request everyone to please come in front for a group photograph. Sir, already has been.
यह दुनिया का ज्ञान, ये ज्ञान की दुनिया